The Eeveelutions. They are some of the most iconic set of Pokemon in the entire series. They all come in different shapes, sizes, have their own set of stats, and each of them have their own unique origin and lore behind them as well. In commemoration of our new rebrand for the channel and this being Eeveelution weekend, I decided I wanted to dive into the Eeveelutions and explain everything I can about them. They are amazing Pokemon and I can easily call them my favorite Pokemon set in the entire franchise. I mentioned what I'm going to be explaining earlier, but as far as the order goes when it comes to explaining, I'll be doing them in sets. Starting will be Eevee, next up Flareon, Jolteon, Vaporeon, etc. I feel like explaining them in sets will make it more interesting rather than go through each one individually, even though that's kind of what I do, but I try not to. With that being said though, I think you guys know what's going down, so let's hop into the evolution history. Firstly, let's dive into the root of the entire Eeveelution family itself, Eevee. Eevee is heavily based on a fennec fox, in addition to also having traits of a dog, cat, and a rabbit. In an interview with Matafumi Fujiwara, Eevee's original designer mentioned that inspiration for Eevee came from childhood memories of an unknown creature he encountered in a forest. Fujiwara then proceeds to say Eevee reminds him of a fluffy cat or a dog, which you can see trait of in its initial design. Hopping into Eevee's name, Eevee's actually known as a palindrome, which is a word, number, phrase, or other sequence of characters which reads the same backward as forward. Going to the root of its name, Eevee in its Japanese name, Eevee, are pronunciations of the letter E and the letter V, the first two letters of the word evolution. Other languages also use the same word origin as English and Japanese. For example, in French, Eevee's name is Eevee, which goes more into the word evolution. Eevee, as you guys can see, is based on the word evolution, which I just mentioned. In addition to its name and its roots, the lore for this Pokemon gets really interesting, especially in some of its dex entries. For example, in its Pokemon Platinum entry it states, because its genetic makeup is irregular, it quickly changes its form due to a variety of reasons. This essentially means Eevee adapts to its environment wherever it can. It also reacts differently to elemental stones, which we see with the Kanto trio. The environmental aspect comes from the Glaceon and Leafeon evolution method, where there are certain rocks that can trigger the evolution. Where we really see this crazy evolution mutation and genetic makeup is actually in the Pokemon Adventures manga, where Red obtains his own Eevee. Red's Eevee, whom he calls V, is actually a science experiment that Team Rocket worked on. Team Rocket attempted merging Articuno, Zapdos, and Moltres into a single Pokemon. With all these experiments done on Eevee, this gave V the ability to be able to mutate into Flareon, Jolteon, and Vaporeon and be able to revert back. The energies of an evolution stone are needed though. Eventually though, V evolves into Espeon permanently and loses his ability to mutate and revert back. Using the manga and dex entries, we can see just how wild Eevee's abilities and genetics can be. Stats wise and competitive viability, Eevee is not really used that much on that side of Pokemon. Eevee however does have a Gigantamax form that can be used, and the design shows off the fluffy white coat it has. Eevee has also been the superstar in a couple of main story Pokemon games too. I'm not talking about how it just appears in the games for capture. I'm talking about it getting its own game cover and title. There's the fact it's been a starter for an important character and being a starter in the title Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness. In Pokemon Let's Go Eevee, you're given a very special partner Eevee that has 31 IVs across the board. In the game, you can do a lot of activities with Eevee, such as playing with it, surfing, and even in some senses, helps you get across obstacles. In Pokemon XD, the main protagonist has an Eevee and is able to evolve it into any of the evolutions they want going up to the Johto duo. Furthering Eevee's appearance, a few important characters from the anime have also owned Eevee and have evolved them into their own evolution forms. Some of these characters include Gary, May, and Serena. I will get into them a bit. I think that just wraps up Eevee's segment though. I still have to go over its other relatives, and that's going to be a while. Starting off the first bit of evolution forms, we have the Kanto trio, Flareon, Jolteon, and Vaporeon. These are the first set of stone evolutions Eevee gets, and is actually the first branch set it gets as well. Going into Flareon first, Flareon evolves from Eevee with a Firestone. Flareon's design seems to resemble that of a fox, along with other traits belonging to a Pomeranian and a lion. The mane and tail looking based on both of these animals. Flareon is a mammal quadruped-like creature with the ability to breathe fire. The ability to breathe fire comes from its internal flame sac. Flareon stores and heats the inhale the air it breathes in this sac, then it exhales, and boom, you got fire. All this pretty much sums up its Pokedex entries. Flareon's name comes from the combination of flare and then eon, referring to the long process evolution actually takes. Flareon's name in Japanese is Booster, which seems to be referring to rocket boosters or any kind of jet boosters. We all see how flame and exploding rockets can be, so I can see where Japan got their inspiration. The French and German names for Flareon are also different. The French name is Pyroli, and the German one is Flammara. Pyro obviously having to do with fire. Flammara also having flame in its name as well. well. Competitively speaking, Flareon is definitely one of the worst out of the evolutions. Having slow speed and lacking any move viability really hinders it from doing well. Its base stat total is 525 and has the stats of 65 HP, 130 attack, 60 defense, 95 special attack, 110 defense, and 65 speed. All evolutions share the same base stat totals and have the same stat numbers, just placed in different areas. The only real competitive strat Flareon has going for it is Guts and Toxic Orb. Even then, because of that speed, Flareon really can't do much. Fire also just really isn't much of a defensive typing, so trying to use its special defense doesn't work out all that well either. If we go into anime appearances, the only real important one it has is from its debut in the Battling Eevee brothers. One of the brothers named Pyra owns a Flareon and is trying to convince his younger brother Mikey to evolve his Eevee into Flareon. Jolteon is actually my least favorite of the evolutions. Its design just doesn't sit well with me. Its design is still based on a fox, but with heavier traits inspired from a herding dog and a coyote. There are also some feline traits on Jolteon, mainly being from a cheetah, I think. That could also explain why Jolteon has extremely high speed. Jolteon also could be inspired from the Raiju, which is a beast from Japanese mythology whose body is made of lightning and can take the form of a cat. Jolteon's name comes from Jolt and Eon. Jolt meaning a burst of electricity, and of course Eon meaning what I mentioned earlier with Flareon. To further explain Jolteon's lightning characteristics, its name in Japanese is literally thunders. French name is Votali, and German is BLITZA, both having to do with volts and electricity. Its Korean name is Jupa Thunder, from the planet Jupiter in Thunder, which is by far the coolest name I have heard for an evolution yet. There's some crazy amount of electrical biology of Jolteon coming from its dex entries, which I'll get into momentarily. Jolteon's prickly spike fur is made of full electricity needles, which generate negatively charged ions. Similar to Flareon's internal flame stack, Jolteon has an organ in its lung that generates electricity. Do you know how much electricity Jolteon can discharge? Let me educate you of Jolteon's Pokedex entries. It accumulates negative ions in the atmosphere to blast out 10,000 volt lightning bolts. Yeah, 10,000 from this little guy. That's a lot, or at least I think so. That sounds like a lot. Lightningologists in the comment section, educate me. I mean, Pikachu can deflect lightning according to Pokemon 2000, so hey, anything's possible, right? Competitive is very easy to talk about with Jolteon. Its two dominant stats are speed and special attack, both at 130 and 110 respectively. Jolteon lacks a decent move pool, but where it's useful is its ability to gain momentum. Volt Switch of Jolteon is its best trait so far. That 130 speed can move all over the place with an opponent constantly trying to scout out what an opponent is trying to do. The rest of its stats are all in the 60s, aside from its special defense, which is 95. 95 isn't bad, but Jolteon is not a wall by any means. Its best ability is by far Volt Absorb, being able to absorb any electric attack it gets hit with and recover HP. Lastly, hopping into the anime, Jolteon is really only owned by one special trainer, being Sparky, whom debuts in the Battling Eevee brothers. And lastly, from the Kanto trio of evolutions is none other than Vaporeon, my favorite of the original three. Vaporeon is the water type evolution that Eevee evolves into once it's exposed to a water stone. Appearance-wise, Vaporeon is definitely one of, if not the most unique designs of any of the 8 evolutions. In addition to the long mermaid-like tail, Vaporeon also spots fins at the side of its head as well as around its neck. It still has that fox-like appearance that the rest of the evolutions have, but it's definitely not as pronounced, that's for sure. There's some speculation that it could also be based off of a Merlin, given how its fins look a bit like a mane. Abilities that it possesses include being able to sense when it is about to rain by detecting moisture in the air with its fins. According to several Pokedex entries as well, its cellular structure is very similar to water molecules, so it is able to melt into the water itself as an act of camouflage. When talking about its name origins, Vaporeon comes from the conjunction of vapor and eon. Simple enough, for its Japanese name, we have showers, which is likely from rain showers. For the French name, we have aqualae, the German being aquana, and the Korean being shamid. Both the French and German names derive from the word aqua, but the Korean one is a name I find most interesting, being a combination of the word shower and mermaid. From a competitive standpoint, Vaporeon is one of the stronger evolutions, with its 130 going to HP, 110 in special attack, and 95 in special defense. Vaporeon really specializes in being a Pokemon with a decent amount of bulk that can hit hard if it needs to. Its move pool isn't particularly exciting, but having access to the ice-type moves it has really does help build the case for it being one of the better ones. Lastly, in regards to Vaporeon in the anime, the most prominent appearance has to yet again be under the ownership of the Eevee brother, Rainer. Starting off the best set of evolutions, we have the Johto set of Umbreon and Espeon. I'll start with Espeon though, because it's best to save the best for last. Espeon evolves from Eevee through friendship in the daytime, when the day-night cycle were first introduced in Generation 2. Out of all the evolutions, I think Espeon has the most interesting origin in lore. Espeon out of all the evolutions looks the most feline. With these feline characteristics in mind, Espeon appears to be strongly inspired from the legends of the Bakaneko and Nekomata, both yokai with traits of intelligence and mystery. Espeon also bears a red gem on its forehead, where its psychic power comes from, which I will get into more in a bit. The red gem seems to take heavy inspiration from that of a carbuncle, and possibly even a lunar eclipse. The ears can be traced to caracals, oriental shorthairs, lynxes, and maybe servals. Espeon has a lot of really cool origins, but I haven't explained how its powers worked yet. I'll get into that once I get into its name. Espeon comes from ESP and Eon. ESP meaning a branch of psychic abilities, and Eon meaning what I've said before. Forgive me if I butcher this. Efe is Espeon's Japanese name, and that comes from ESPER, a person with psychic powers, and feel, referring to its extraordinary sensory abilities. The other names in French, German, and Korean are also really cool. French is MENTALI. German is, I believe, Siana or Sayana, one of the two. And Korean sounds very similar to Eevee's Japanese name, Ibue. Also, if I butchered any of those names, I do apologize. I'm not that great at pronouncing things. That just adds to the comedy, right? Now for the interesting part, how Espeon's powers work. The three main parts of its body that makes its powers work are its lilac fur, its tail, and its gem. The lilac fur is used to sense minute shifts in the air, allowing it to predict the weather. The fur and tail can also be used to predict its opponent's next move. The main power comes from its red gem. The red gem boosts the psychic powers it gained to be able to protect its trainer from harm. Psychic power builds up in the gem if it gathers enough sunlight, thus making it the most powerful when it battles during the day. Espeon is not great at battling during the night. When its power is exhausted, the orb will turn dark. So the main source of its power comes from the gem. Fun fact too, Espeon originally did not have any power at all. Its psychic powers developed with the need to protect itself. Going into competitive, Espeon shines incredibly well here. Espeon has a decent move pool, and has the ultimate move for it, Calm Mind. Calm Mind is one of the best moves for Espeon, and sets. As a trainer, focus on Calm Mind, and focus on its special attack and speed for sure. Earlier I had mentioned that Red's Eevee, V, lost its ability to mutate and thus evolved into Espeon. When V was an Eevee, it had a really hard time opening up to humans due to its rough passive Team Rocket. V opened up to Red though, and they became awesome friends, even helping Red pass his test to become the Viridian Gym Leader. Red prefers V to be an Espeon because it is no longer burdened with its past. V is my favorite Pokemon Red owns, it is completely adorable. Game appearances, Espeon was a starter in Pokemon Coliseum to the protagonist Wes. Same also applies to the manga. Alright, saving the best for last in the Johto duo, we get into this channel's mascot and my favorite Pokemon, Umbreon. Umbreon, like Espeon, evolves from the day and night cycle, except Umbreon evolves at night and with friendship too, obviously. As much as I love Umbreon though, it isn't as interesting as Espeon, but let's hop into it. Umbreon's origin case is a bit of a mystery. I've seen people say it's based on a black cat, or from the Eastern Asian legends of the moon rabbit possibly. Its rings seem to have drawn inspiration from Egyptian lunar markings and jewelry that have been associated with animal sculptures, such as the cat statues of the Egyptian goddess Bastet. Bastet was originally a lioness warrior goddess of the sun throughout most of Egypt's history. She was later changed into the cat goddess seen though today. She was seen as a defender of the king, along with other deities like Ra, the sun god. Another origin Umbreon is connected with is Tezcatlipoca, a deity in Aztec religion. Tezcatlipoca took the form of a black jaguar that had yellow horizontal bands and was also associated with the nighttime sky. I think this origin makes the most sense for it. Okay, I take back what I said about Umbreon not being that interesting. Those origins are killer. What's also killer though is the biology and dex entries behind Umbreon. Umbreon evolved because of the moon's energy pulses. The moon changed Eevee's genetic structure once again, having environmental factors trigger an evolution. When Umbreon is about to take a prey, its rings glow and then it strikes. When it angers, not only do the rings light up, but it pores secrete sweat, which it sprays at its opponent's eyes. It's essentially a skunk, but it uses its sweat, which is actually pretty poisonous. Due to this entry, some people believe Umbreon was supposed to originally be a poison type Pokemon. Like always, all these are mentioned in Dex entries. Competitive wise, like how I mentioned in my ranking the Eeveelutions video, Umbreon was a great Titan, but lost a lot of its power. When I mean power, I mean the power to stall. Umbreon losing Toxic was detrimental for its competitive value. Don't get me wrong, it's not horrible, but Toxic is what made it truly shine. So I hate Sword and Shield for getting rid of its main value. If you still want to run Wish though, and make it a cleric, it can work alright, but I think Sylveon is a way better cleric. Run Special Defense or Defensive Umbreon if you want it to work best for you. Anime appearances, Gary's Eevee evolved into Umbreon, which I love by the way. Gladion also had an Umbreon, but to me it didn't have as much of an impact. Nonetheless, I have to show respect to Pokemon Sun and Moon. Next, we're going to take a look at the 4th generation's evolutions, being the Grass-type Leafeon and the Ice-type Glaceon. Glaceon will evolve from Eevee when you're near an icy rock in games prior to Generation 8, though in the 8th generation, you've got an ice rock that will evolve it for you. As for Leafeon, it originally only evolved when near a moss rock, but also ends up evolving with the Leaf Stone in Generation 8. Starting off with Glaceon, it's got a really cool design to it that resembles an Arctic fox more than anything. It's got a crest on its head that ends up having 2 dangling flaps droop down the sides and resembles some sort of headgear like an Ushanka hat. Its biology allows for it to create ice shards around its body by controlling its body temperature, and it can also freeze up its fur and the sharp needle like icicles. The majority of these facts actually come from the many Pokedex entries that Glaceon has throughout its appearances in the games. Glaceon's name scheme follows the majority of the other evolutions, featuring the Eon suffix, but it takes glace, which is the French word for ice, and plugs it in beforehand. Funny enough, the Japanese name for Glaceon is Glacia, which is shared with the Elite Four member of the same name in the English releases of Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald. Glaceon is actually also an anagram for congeal, which means to freeze something. Glaceon's stats offer a lot of interesting options, as it has 130 special attack, 110 defense, and 95 special defense. You can easily make Glaceon a bulky special attacker, as there are plenty of good ice-type moves you can turn to that will help make Glaceon a Pokemon that any dragon type would think twice about messing with. It's got Snow Cloak and Ice Body for ability options as well, each allowing Glaceon to take full advantage of any hailstorm that might be set up. Also, may happen to own an Eevee that eventually evolved into a Glaceon in the Pokemon anime. Now let's talk about Glaceon's counterpart, Leafeon. Leafeon has got a great design, featuring leaf-like ears and tail that are quite simply very imaginative. According to the Pokedex, Leafeon has got the same type of cellular structure as a plant, and thus is able to undergo photosynthesis, which allows it to create fresh oxygen when it lays out in the sunlight. Leafeon actually doesn't like fighting at all, choosing to avoid doing so if it can. However, when pushed into a brawl, it'll sharpen its leafy tail and prepare for a fight. When it's young, Leafeon will smell quite similar to freshly grown grass, while starting to smell more and more like fallen leaves as it ages. That's dark. Leafeon's name is a pretty straightforward one, like most of the evolution names, featuring the same Eon suffix, but with leaf right before it. Obviously, since many of its appendages are very reminiscent of leaves, its Japanese name actually features the word as well, Leafia. It bears a striking resemblance to a Siamese cat, and its dark brown paws even make it appear as though it is constantly buried in the dirt. There happens to be several urban legends in Japan that speak of animals who were domesticated re-entering the wild and eventually becoming one with nature, and it could possibly be seen that Leafeon is an exaggeration of those stories. In a competitive sense, Leafeon is definitely one of the evolutions that strays closer to the physical side than not. Its defense stat is 130, and its attack stat is 110. That second one sort of going against the fact that it is essentially a pacifist. Leafeon can make great use of Leaf Blade and Leech Seed to be a bit of a bulky physical attacker, and that makes it one of the more interesting evolutions in competitive play, at least prior to the 8th generation. It has Leaf Guard and Chlorophyll as abilities, which very much mirror Glaceon's Snow Cloak and Ice Body, as they are essentially the same abilities, but instead activated by the sun instead of hail. In the anime, there weren't many important appearances made by Leafeon, though a Pokemon coordinator named Zoe uses one in the Sinnoh Grand Festival to great success. Finally, we reached the last evolution. Generation 6's Sylveon, and my second favorite of the evolution bunch. Sylveon was the first fairy-type Pokemon that we were introduced to during the months leading up to X and Y. Its design is very much a far cry different than the other evolutions we already have featuring rounded ears, as opposed to the usual pointed ones. The idea behind Sylveon may come from the Japanese moon rabbit, as most fairies are known to be active under the moonlight, and since it bears a bit of a resemblance to a jackrabbit thanks to those ears. The moon rabbit is often portrayed as a companion of the Chinese goddess, Chang'e, who herself is often shown wearing a robe covered in ribbons. Sylveon's name, of course, features that all too similar Eon suffix in Sylph or Sylvan. Either could possibly work here, as a Sylph is a mythical creature that is described as being invisible in the air, and Sylvan is referring to an association being woodlands or forest, which are both places that fairies are often depicted as hanging around. Its Japanese name is Nymphia, which is derived from nymph, which is a deity in Greek mythology that is associated with a particular location or landform. In the anime, Serena has an Eevee that ends up evolving into a Sylveon during a tag battle of Ash's Pikachu against a pair of opponents. In the X and Y manga, the main character of Y has a Sylveon as well. Sylveon is very much the special version of Leafeon, as it has 130 in special defense and 110 in special attack. The fairy typing is by far one of the most powerful in the games, and with the ability Pixelate at Sylveon's command, it can take a move like Hyper Voice and turn it into an absolutely devastating attack. When compared to the 7 other evolutions, it is honestly quite possible that Sylveon is the strongest of them all, and I really do mean that. You could never afford to sleep on that highest special attack of Moonblast and Pixelate Hyper Voice in play. Well, that wraps up all the Eeveelutions explained. I learned a lot from creating this video, and I hope you all did as well. Making videos like this is actually the kind of videos I enjoy making the most when it comes to content creation. So if you guys want more videos like this, let me know down below. What's your favorite Eeveelution though? Let me know that down below as well. If you enjoyed the video, why not leave a like and subscribe to my channel with notifications on, that way you never miss an upload. If you want to support me further, consider following my Twitch where I stream a lot of Pokemon content and all kinds of other Nintendo content like Zelda, Fire Emblem, and much more. Also, I've been reviewing every episode of My Hero Academia Season 4 over on Mystic Sage, so head over there if you're into that too. I would love that a lot. Want to support me further and gain cool perks? Check out my Patreon. Daniel Leone, Lady Crimson, Memory Martin, The Lazy Leo, Matthew Young, Awesome Lego, Jarrett Wees Austin, Sudden Grider, and Enigma97 did. And I want to thank them personally for going above and beyond. It means the world to me. I think I'm gonna wrap this up though. I'm Mr. Gumbrian, and I will see you in the future for more awesome Pokemon content.